right.
So we are continuing with the Upanishads. Today we are doing the Katha Upanishad and then also the Brihadaranyaka
Hmm.
Upanishad. I'm going to say it that way. Yeah, so I got some notes to start us out with the Katha Upanishad. Um, it's with from what I've read about the Upanishads, the some are written in verse and some are written in prose.
Hmm.
No, yeah, yeah, verse like poetry, and then in prose, this one is written primarily in verse. There's a narrative structure to the Katha Upanishad. We've got a boy. I'm going to take a stab at his name,
Uh,
Nachikitas.
Nachikita,
Right? There's
that
that.
one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it chi? Not chi?
Nachikita. No, I think so.
Okay, let's go with Nachikitas. We have a boy, and essentially the narrative frame is that he visits Yama, the lord of the dead, but there's um, a story that leads into that. uh,
Well, he
so
gives
it's
his
dealing with his
father gives
father.
him away.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So it starts with his father before he goes to Yama, the lord of the dead. And first, the father gives away all of his possessions,
Hmm.
and that's when the son, Nachikitas, uh, asks him the big question: "To whom will you give me?" Um, so I guess there's a little thing going on there that he's sort of his dad's property, right? Right.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And also, there's something play or something I don't know, playful or poetic in that question, right? And then his father, in a very seemingly stark way, says, I give you death, okay, or I'm going to give you to death. I'm looking at my notes. What was the actual one in our text? I
To whom will you offer me? To death I give you. Yeah.
To death I give you. Okay,
Hmm.
so heavy stuff there. Um, should say too, because this is important as it comes to the three later wishes. There's some agitation between the son and the dad, so the father gets somewhat upset, and that becomes important
Hmm.
in one of the boons or wishes that comes up. So Nachikitas goes to the realm of the dead. When he arrives, Yama, the lord of the dead, is not home. So
Yeah.
Nachikitas waits for 3 days, and then Yama arrives finally, and Yama seems to be somewhat hospitable, even though being Lord of the Dead, because he feels bad that Nachikitas has been there for 3 days without um, proper uh, accommodations and food.
Yeah.
So due to this lack of seeming hospitality, Yama offers Nachi, sorry, Nachikitas, yeah, Nachikitas, three wishes, or in our text called boons.
Hmm. Hmm.
I read on the side, this is actually one of the earliest of the sort of genie three
Oh,
wishes
really?
things.
Okay.
Yeah, to be found. I mean, obviously, it's going to be one of the earliest because of how ancient the text is. So the
Hmm.
first wish that Nachikitas asks for is to be able to return to his father and be greeted with joy. So that goes back to the earlier narrative about the tension between the father. So he grants that. We'll
Hmm.
find that the first two wishes are pretty simple
Well,
and
the second
straightforward.
one, yeah.
Well, well, what?
I was gonna say they kind of increase in complexity.
Oh, yeah, no,
Yeah.
no, that's true, right? So then the second wish is to learn the fire ritual that leads to heaven.
Yeah.
Um, and and I think we'll get this with the Rig Veda because the Rig Veda and some of the early Vedic texts are, we've said this before, are ritually based. They're almost like ritual manuals.
Hmm.
So the fire one is, I believe, an important one, and maybe we'll get more into what that fire ritual was when we get to the Rig Veda or other
Sure.
reading. And then the big one is the
Well,
third
wait,
wish.
before the big
Oh, I'm
one, he
sorry.
gives
Yeah,
him a
let's go for it.
special boon because he actually names that ritual after Nachikita,
Oh, that's right. That's
right?
right.
So
Exactly.
that's
Right.
like, whoa, he
So wait
repeated
a
the
minute. Well, one,
instruction.
right. He teaches them
He
the
teaches him,
ritual,
he
and then you're
performs
right.
it.
He does. he names it after him.
Yeah. So special boon right there.
So
And then we
that's
get on to the third one,
then we get
which,
into the third one, which Yama is not as willing to grant um, as he was the first two. And basically the question there is what happens to the dead,
yeah,
right?
what happens after you die?
What happens after you die?
And Yama's like,
Yama's
no, let me
funny,
give
yeah,
you anything else.
yeah,
You can have all the riches in the
yeah,
world. You can have
yeah.
whatever you
Right.
want.
This is you're doing the hard question here, right? This is like, what's the meaning of life? Why is there something rather than nothing? I can't do this. Although it is interesting as a side question as to why he hesitates. I mean, is after all the Lord of the Dead. You he would know.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just more complicated. It's like it's a lot
Yeah.
easier to give someone all the
Yeah.
riches
Oh,
than to give
true.
them
And
like
also too,
the wisdom.
it builds up Nachikitas' character because
Yeah,
he almost so even just as a narrative structure, he's like, no, no, no. He's like, you have wealth, have all this other stuff. Ask me anything else, all the material
yeah,
gifts. And Nachikitas is like, no. So it says something about Nachikitas' character in terms of like persistent and curious for sure,
hmm
you know.
yeah,
And I guess we could say spiritual. By the
hmm
way, side note, in an older version of this Upanishad, he actually doesn't want to know that question. He wants to know how to ward off recurring death. So,
Oh,
so in
like
other
an
words, the
incarnation?
cycle,
Yeah,
yeah, the cycle of rebirth, still related to death, but
right.
slightly different. So
Interesting.
then, basically, what happens from there on is that Yama gives in and explains the truth about life and death and the eternal Atman. Um, I'll make some other comments, but then we can dig into the text.
hmm
The Atman is eternal. That's a big one. It does not die when the body dies. The beautiful image in chapter 3 is the image of the chariot.
hmm
The Atman is like a rider in a chariot, and I broke these pieces down just so it's easier than going back to the text. But he's like a rider in the chariot. So the self, or Atman, is the rider. The body that we have is the chariot. The intellect is the charioteer. The mind, the reins. And I love this. The senses, the wild horses that must be controlled.
Yeah.
Right. Um, so it's a beautiful image, by the way. Even before I did my extra research, while I was reading, I read it first, the text first, and then did some research. Um, I thought of Plato because
Mm.
Plato has an analogy of the soul where you have where I'm sorry, where it is like a chariot image,
Yeah.
and it's slightly different. The way he breaks up the soul for or psyche for the way Plato breaks up the psyche is reason, spirit, and then at bottom, base desires or just raw desire. So reason, the most important part. We all know that is spirit. What he means by spirit is actually um, almost like energy. What it's the part of our psyche or soul or being. It's almost sort of like the fight or flight, or the part that throws us into sport or into war.
Hmm
Um, and sometimes that mark distinguishes people more than reason, depending on who you are. Like the soldier, I guess, would have more spirit than reason. The leader should have more reason than spirit. And then at the bottom, we all have all parts. Is just desire for food, pleasures, sex, stuff like that.
hmm
So, and it's interesting because reason needs the two horses of spirit and desire. Reason needs to be the one that's holding the reins,
Interesting.
right?
Yeah.
In fact, he says that for Plato, the sort of inverted soul, the problematic soul, is when that's not happening, and when the spirit holds the reins of a reason and a desire, or even worse, desire holds the reins, right, of reason
Mm,
and spirit,
hmm.
and I mean, imagine that, right? And desire is almost sort of similar to the senses here, I
Right,
think.
right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Um, uh, when we get to Buddhism, there's apparently another story that's similar to the chariot in Theravada Buddhism, that particular school of Buddhism. So I'll try
Okay.
and dig that up.
Hmm.
Um, and then we'll get into the text, but basically the text concludes with Nachiketa having attained Brahman after receiving this knowledge from Yama, and also there's the notion that anyone else can as well,
Hmm.
um, because we all have this within us. So that's sort of the summary of the text. We can look at specifics though.
Yeah.
Now we read this a while ago, but I do remember when I was reading it, I was like, man,
It's a lot
this
easier to
packs
read
a
than,
punch.
yeah, it does. It hits, and it's a lot
Yeah,
easier to follow than the Isha, for example. The Isha is
yeah,
very much more poetic, whereas this one,
yep,
being a dialogue, um, there's something personal about it, I think.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
I mean, plus it goes into a
Um,
question that everybody's curious about.
yeah, precisely, precisely. Um, yeah, I mean, they really go into it when I didn't forgot some of this. When does he give these? Let's see.
Give which?
This boon I choose to add. I'm trying to think of when he asked, when he finally gives in the last
Oh,
wish.
yeah, that's
Start
on what,
describing it.
75, right?
Is it 75? Okay.
Yeah, because 74 is Nachiketa denying the
Oh, don't. Yeah,
pleasures.
yeah, yeah. 74 is, yeah, exactly. Right. So in other words, right, because he's trying to sell them. He's trying to sell them for all these other things, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um, ask for sons and grandsons,
yeah.
herds of cow, elephants, horses, gold, vast land, and then on the top of 74, he's like, these pleasures last but until tomorrow.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm not going to. I want to know the question. You um, and then Yama gives in, starting in 75, right?
Yeah, or at least gives like a precursor, I think,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
then
he does because
really
he's
goes
really
into it.
talking about perennial joy versus passing pleasure, um, or abiding joy.
Hmm.
Like he sort of gets it, you know, that Chiquita's just, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
he's not
Bec
to buy into these. And he even says it, for passing pleasures tempt you not at all. So,
hmm.
um, and then I guess it's starting at 76.
Yeah, 76. It's like
That's when we start to get
a few
begin to
who
debate.
hear about the self dedicate their lives to its realization. The truth of the self cannot come
Yeah,
through one who has not realized that he is the self.
yeah, yep. The
Wow,
intellect
yeah.
cannot reveal the self beyond its duality of subject and object. Yeah, and it's interesting too because on 77 we start to get the method, right? In bottom of 77, line 12, the wise realizing through meditation the timeless self beyond all perception, hidden in the cave of the heart, leave pain and pleasure far behind. Meaning, in other words, like, and I think this is what's intriguing about Hinduism from a Western perspective is that you ultimately have somewhat you have a process, you have some type of like experiment where you can experiment with uh, finding this timeless self,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
and that is ultimately through meditation.
Yeah. Or, well, if you look at the three different, am I forgetting a name? Is it jhanas? Or no?
Yanas.
Yanas,
Yeah,
yeah, the yanas. Yeah.
yogas.
The three different yogas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Right,
Jnana
right, right.
yoga,
Yeah, yeah,
bhakti
yana,
yoga.
bhakti,
Four. They're
and
four. Jnana, bhakti, raja, and karma
oh, right,
yoga.
right, right. Karma. Yep.
Yeah, no, you're right. No, that's true too, because not all of them are meditative,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Right. Um, right, because the yana is more like scripture based,
Hmm.
bhakti more love based, work based, work always done to God, right? And then right, the meditation would fall more into the raja.
Yeah. Hmm. Or the
Uh,
experimental meditation. You might have some meditation with
no,
the yana.
that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. And actually, to
I
be
with the others
fair,
too, but also it
yeah,
does say that.
if you can immerse yourself in it
Yeah.
with an orientation to discover what is real, as it were. You know,
Yeah.
um,
And it's not at
but
all
but
side
it
like
seems like the go ahead.
it's not an one. Each one is one that you just go all in on. You know, it's
Right.
you mix and match. So you would have meditation no matter what, I suppose.
Yeah. No. No. No.
Yeah.
True. True. Exactly. My sense though is that I don't know. Maybe it's my bent, and also like I want to know. Because I feel like with the bhakti yoga, I'm not Hindu, so just throwing myself into like the compassion and worship of Hindu gods would not draw me in as well,
Hmm.
from for so this is just all personal. And there's something about like, man, I really want to see it. You know what I'm saying? Like I would love to be in a super deep state of meditation after years of practice and then have that aha moment,
Hmm. Hmm.
where it's like I actually do see the real or experience the reality of the Atman Brahman connect,
Hmm.
you know. Um, and I think we've mentioned before that a number of yogis have, I mean, they've seen their past lives in a heightened state of consciousness.
Yeah.
So something like that to me is like bring that on, you know. And
Yeah.
it's interesting too. I forget when I read that. It had to be within this context. Man, it's probably a line too. I'm not sure which Upanishad it's in,
Mm.
but it says something like, and I thought about this too about myself because I think it's helpful to put yourself in the role of like when we're reading this, and you probably have done it too, but it's sort of put yourself in the role of okay, like let's just imagine this is the world, right? Let's imagine all this Brahman. I have this Atman. I you know I'm in a particular incarnation,
Hmm.
and I've been in who knows how many before, but it was some man, I don't know where it was, but it doesn't matter where it was. It was something like you are working out your particular desire in this incarnation. Like in other words, there's a thing that you are in that there is a reason why you are Christian
Hmm.
in this incarnation, and life is set up the way that it is because of your past incarnations, and maybe more specifically your last one
Hmm.
that you're working out. And I want to say the word was desire. You're working out some desire, and maybe it is, I don't know, to extinguish it,
Hmm.
something along those lines. And it made me think about like wow, so playing with the world a little bit, this possible world. I was like,
Yeah.
so let's just imagine if I am in this incarnation, what would that be for me? What would be the like thing that I would need to work on in this incarnation based on my life and based on my temperament and based on choices I make and have
Hmm.
made, you know. And I thought about that, in terms of what is it?
Interesting.
And for me, I was wondering if it uh, was well, two things come to mind. One is I've always really been interested in religion.
Hmm.
So as a child, grew up within our Protestant family. My father is a pastor. I remember reading stuff in my teens when I wasn't a really good student that was above my level, just out of interest. It was like Christian apologetics, just out of interest, and I didn't even fully understand all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, Connecting with T.M. Moore, the one sort of intellectual pastor we had at Tony Presbyterian Church, working at the seminary. Well, not ultimately, but a big part of the divorce was me questioning my faith. After that, exploring multiple religions, and here I am now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it may be like and that's on everyone's bent. So it's like playing with this possible world. Is that the case? Then I'm really like Nachikitas, like in a way, like I'm in a incarnation where I want to figure out these mysteries. Maybe like 10 or 13, 20 incarnations ago, I didn't give a damn about it. Like it's sort of this gradual, that's one that sort of comes to mind. Or I, you know, struggle with, you know, certain forms of hedonism, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it's like sort of the drinking and so on and so forth. It's like, is that is that the desire I'm supposed to sort of like burn out
Right.
this incarnation? I don't know. It's interesting to play with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll have to think about that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it was in this text, but it was something like every incarnation deals with a desire, or I guess another way you could put it is like a project. There's pieces of you that need to be dealt with now
Mm-hmm.
in
There's a
order to.
problem to solve.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Or problems. And you could probably look at your own life too and play that out in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like, you're analytical. You're more than analytical, but you are analytical. You're smart. You've got you know more about your personality than I do from the inside. What you struggle with. What are those patterns? Could those patterns reference the problem
Right.
that
Mm-hmm.
that you're here to solve? It's interesting,
Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
so.
I'll definitely be thinking about
So
that.
what else on this Upanishad?
um.
Uh, we've still got the language of self-restraint, self-nodding, all 78.
Right.
And we also get the reference to Om in that section as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Realizing it, one finds complete fulfillment of what all one's want. When Om reverberates unceasingly within the heart, that one is indeed blessed and deeply loved as one who is the self.
Where was that?
78, middle
Oh.
up.
Oh. Oh.
So
70.
Yama speaking.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, this is interesting too, because if you go to 78, line 23, Yama's taken a stand. I don't know when the four yogas were like formally established, but Yama's sort of taking a stand on I would say a bias toward the Raja Yoga. He says the
Mm.
self cannot be known through study of the scriptures, nor through the intellect, nor through hearing discourses about it. The self can be attained only by those who the self chooses. Verily unto them is the self. That's sort of interesting.
Mm.
Um, the next page, the self cannot be known by anyone who desists not from unrighteous ways. Uh, wow, you've got a lot of negatives there. Who
Cannot be
desists
known by
not
anyone
from
who desists.
unrighteous ways. So you've got to be righteous.
You
Um,
must. Yeah. Self
right?
can be known by anyone who follows righteous ways. Right.
Exactly, exactly. Which, by the way, was the starting point for all of the yogas, right?
Hmm.
The sort of the ethics.
Yes,
Yeah, to have
yes.
sort of the ethical, like no self harm, no lying. Um,
Yeah, there were like five of them, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I, yeah, I mean, we don't have to look them up now, but they were sort of basic ethical principles that are essential for each of the yogas. So that's like,
Yeah, there were actually, weren't there 10? There were like five that were negatives and then there were five that were positives because
yeah.
I have this actually written on my wall. It's the
Oh,
self-control,
cool.
cleanliness, contentment. I can't actually
Yep.
read that one because I wrote it in yellow. Is it studiousness? Yeah. And then contemplation of the divine. So those are like the five
Nice,
positive ones. I don't
nice.
remember, like there were five abstentions as well, which was like
Yep,
lying,
yep.
pleasure seeking, and a couple others. I don't,
Oh, okay, yeah. I've got
yeah.
not injury, truthfulness, non-stealing, self-control, cleanliness, contentment, self-discipline.
Hmm, hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
um, yeah, and I remember talking about like why is it that those are there? Like, what do they point to?
Hmm, hmm.
Right?
I mean, it seems like
Not just sort of
they
like, not
prepare
just sort
you.
of like be good, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
They like they make it so that the chariot can function,
Yes,
right?
precisely, precisely, precisely.
Because all of
So
those
the ethical
things,
component is key.
yeah, they all help the mind, right? The intellect and the mind,
Yeah,
if which are the intellect is the charioteer and the mind is the reins. So those are the things that are probably the most important for steering
yeah,
and getting
yeah,
you on track.
exactly, exactly. No,
Hmm,
precisely. And it's interesting too with this, is the self cannot be known by anyone um, who controls not the senses,
hmm.
stills not the mind, and practices not meditation.
Yeah.
I did a 45-minute meditation the other day,
Hmm.
and it was really interesting. Actually, it was not in the best setting. I was at Michael's soccer practice in a parking lot,
Yeah.
and um, I just I moved my chair back in the car a little bit, just had space to cross my legs, and then meditated, and it was really wild. Actually, the thing was I just did silent meditation and then just focused on my breath.
Hmm,
Um, and then toward the end, I did a repetition. I would say the end, maybe like 15 minutes,
hmm.
maybe 10, of nonstop bones. And it was wild when I got out of the car to to get them from the field
Hmm.
because it was just there was I almost felt like I felt like my consciousness was a little bit more expansive,
Mm.
um, soft, settled, um, and there wasn't the sort of discursive piece going on in my mind of like this thought jumping to that thought, jumping to that thought,
Right, right.
bouncing around. It was really interesting. It was sort of like a nice element of calm. Um, so it made me think too, just like how unstilled or unsettled our minds usually are, you
Hmm.
know, um, which which I mean, actually, it's sort of interesting, like playing with the possible world that this is true metaphysically. It makes sense. If you're distracted, you're not seeing things, right?
Yeah,
You're just not
yeah.
seeing things as they are. Or the the old Zen saying of like, "What haven't you noticed me?"
Mm.
Because of the monkey mind and the thoughts and the desires and the senses pulling this way and that way. Um, I had actually even like left my phone home by accident. And so the only way I could track the time was to stop meditating for a bit, turn the car on. It was funny, and find out what time it was, so I wasn't late to pick them up. Which I did. I didn't do that much, but so just if if it is the case that we're wrapped up with self, and then we're wrapped up with a distracted self, I could easily see that if you're able to reverse those, that you could see reality with more clarity.
Hmm.
You know,
Definitely.
um, so the idea of stilling the mind, I think, is really interesting.
Hmm.
You know,
Agreed.
and hard to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I was on the metro yesterday, in DC, and there were a lot of people on it, and like almost all of them had their phones out or earbuds in.
Yeah, yeah,
And I I was going to. I had earbuds to put in, but they we were actually dead, so I
yeah,
couldn't. And I was like, well, whatever. I guess I'll just sit here and, and observe.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, no, it was like, wow, there's so many people packed into this vessel,
yeah.
and none of them are communicating with each other. They're all just
Sure.
there, absorbed in whatever world they have.
Right.
Um, I was like, wow,
Yeah.
yeah,
So you just took it in.
I just took it in. That
Yeah.
that was my meditation yesterday,
Yeah.
kind of.
No, that's a good one. That's a good one because as I said before, the one Buddhist saying is that, or Zen saying is that you can meditate if you can meditate on an intersection and business and
Yeah,
nothing distracting. You
yeah,
know
yeah,
what I'm
yeah.
saying?
Oh, yeah. I also that somewhat related, but not entirely. I have this app on my phone. I think I don't remember what it's called. It's called like the Daily Stoic or something. And anyways, it comes up with a little quote of the day. And yesterday, I think it was a quote from Napoleon.
Hmm.
And it was like true genius um, is being able to do an average thing when everyone else's minds are going crazy or going wild.
There you go. There you go.
I was like,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's wild.
Hmm.
That's
So
wild.
yeah, cure the
Well,
monkey
one
mind.
thing,
No.
yeah, exactly. Well, actually, I was just noticing too the repetition of the phrase, the one-pointed mind.
Hmm. Hmm.
Page 85, only the one-pointed mind in the state of unity. Um, uh, comes up again. But I like that. I mean, that's when it's still, right?
Yeah.
That's when you can ultimately sort of see things as they are. I mean, yeah, top of 91. When the five senses are still, when the mind is still, when the intellect is still, that is called the highest state by the wise. They say yoga is this complete stillness in which one enters the unitive state, never to become separate again.
Hmm.
I mean, this is why, before we move into the other Upanishad, this is why when in the 1960s, when intellectuals and then celebrities and others were messing around with LSD, they had this unitive experience.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, and that apparently the content of the acid at that point was high, acutely high. So you would have entire ego loss.
Hmm.
So if you have entire ego loss, you are it. You are everything, right? And then they'd come out of it,
Yeah.
and then they'd have to do it again, and then they come out of it. And then there were a number of intellectuals, Ram Dass being one, and the Beatles did it as well, and other people, where they were like, where can we stay there? Where can we stay
Mm.
in this state of mind, as opposed to be in it and then come out and go out? And that's where the East popped up,
Hmm.
and that's where they discovered sort of this esoteric um, Hindu, and then I guess for others Buddhist um, method, where it was not where you were not eating anything, you were not ingesting anything, there were these disciplines of meditation and actual physical yoga and a vegetarian lifestyle, so on and so forth, all of those, and these ethical practices that we were talking about,
Hmm.
where
Hmm.
you can entirely be in that state. I think too there was a story I'd read back in the day where um, it was either Ram Dass, it might have been Ram Dass. His classic book is Be Here Now,
Hmm.
and I think it has all of his little drawings in it too. So it's a clever book, and and he talks about his journey to the east. And he's sitting with a yogi, a yoga or yogi, and he gives him acid.
The yogi
And
gives him acid, or he
no,
gives the
no,
yogi?
no. Ram Dass gives the yogi acid to take, and he takes it. It takes like one hit, which would blow most people's mind.
Hmm.
No reaction. And then he gives him another hit, doubly blown, no reaction, no response, as
Hmm.
if he was in this like state of mind, or the unitive state of mind already,
Mm-hmm.
and had no effect on him.
Wow.
So, yeah. All right. Should we move to?
Yeah.
Do you want to look at the
Brihadaranyaka. Yeah, this one is
Brihadar Anyaka?
Brihadaranyaka. This one's broken up into multiple chapters.
Mm-hmm.
I think is it ours actually starts with chapter two, it looks like.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Let's see.
I
Did
think I saw that
Oh, it says it's divided into six. So
yeah, yeah.
we're not given all six here, but it's six chapters. And what I did read is it's the oldest and the longest Upanishad.
Yes, yes. So I think we have the middle four chapters because we have two through
Hmm.
five. Um, and there's kind of different sections in these. Um, I'm trying to remember I think the middle ones were the most interesting. What was this first one? This first one is on immortality, the path to immortality.
Hmm. Hmm.
Oh yeah, is it? Uh, Ya? Is it? Do you think the J is pronounced Yajnavalkya
No.
or no Yai?
Yeah, Yaj. Yeah, no, it's got to be. It's got to. It seems like it would be J. Yeah, Yaj.
Yeah,
Yajna Valkya.
Yajnavalkya. Yeah. And Yajnavalkya is kind of one of the characters in
Hmm.
most of this.
Yeah, right.
Um, yeah. So this first one,
He's talking to his wife, right?
he's talking to his wife, trying
Which.
to divide his property.
Hmm. And the key one is, or the key question is, please tell me, my Lord, of the way that leads to immortality. That sort of thing, right?
Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Um, right, and you cannot buy immortality with money. Um, okay, and then wants to know the other ways that lead to immortality.
Right. I like a little mantra, as it were, or not mantra, but the repetition of
Yes,
100.
on 100, where
Yeah.
he talks about, okay, yeah, this is what's interesting because um, this is kind of one of the patterns that's shown in
Hmm.
defining what the self is.
Yeah.
And so, for example, we have 4.5, a wife loves her husband not for his own sake, dear, but because the self love lives in him. A husband
Hmm.
loves his wife not for her own sake, dear, but because the self lives in her. Children are
Yeah. It's
loved
like
not for their own sake,
yeah.
but because the self lives in them. And that pattern repeats for all of these different categories that are loved.
Brahmins. Yeah.
Universe,
Universe.
Brahmins,
All of
yeah, gods, creatures, and then it ends with everything is love, not for its own sake, but because the self lives in it. And so
it. Yeah.
um, this is this is kind of similar to the concept of neti neti, which is for defining God. It's not this, not this, not this.
Yes.
It's like it's
Yes.
because it's all of it's like everything. It's
Right.
beneath everything, and so
Right.
um, the self is beneath all of these individual things, and that is why we love it, which is interesting because it's like
Hmm.
we see ourselves in all of these things. And I think
Yeah.
this was also mentioned in the Isha Upanishad, right?
Hmm.
Um, where it was like if you are similar to another creature, then you'd
Yes.
love it.
There's yeah, exactly,
Hmm.
exactly. There, right,
So it's
right.
the
There
same
would
kind of
be,
concept.
yeah, yeah. There, there's just looking for that real quickly because it's a short one. Yeah, they see all creatures of themselves as the Isha.
Hmm.
And themselves in all creatures know no grief. How
Hmm.
can the multiplicity of life delude the one who sees its unity? Self is everywhere, bright as the self, so on and so
Hmm.
forth.
Hmm.
And this one really also plays a good bit on the problem of separateness, you know, which I would say is a function of the unenlightened mind,
Hmm.
according to this tradition, right?
Yeah, because
Because
well,
that
you don't
comes
have
up
unity with
throughout.
separateness.
Yeah, exactly. And that it's an illusion. Um, I'm looking at 102 where he's saying the separate self dissolves. I'm sorry. Yeah, the separate self dissolve is for 4.12. The separate self dissolves into the sea of pure consciousness, infinite and immortal. Separateness arises from identifying the self with the body. So that's the illusion,
Hmm.
right? So I am this body. Um, I am not this laptop that I'm looking at, the bug to my right, the courtyard, the sky, etc.
Yeah.
So I'm local. Um, and even Maitreya says in 4.13, I'm bewildered, blessed one, when you say there is then no separate self. And then he
Hmm.
goes on. Um, as long as there is separateness, one sees another as separate from oneself.
Hears another,
But
sees it, smells another, speaks to another,
yeah,
thinks of another as separate.
yeah. But when the self is realized as the indivisible unity of life, who can be seen, who can be seen by whom, who can be heard by whom can be smelled by whom, right?
Hmm.
But those things fall apart.
How can the knower ever be known?
Mhm.
Interesting.
Oh, and yeah, yeah. So yeah, so we're going back to that sort of the metaphysical monism. It's all connected.
Hmm.
It's just an illusion to think that um, that that separateness is a real thing.
Right.
You know, and I would imagine again with the
Is
various yogas. Go
I was gonna say, is that a non-dualistic view, or is that manifesting different here than in like maybe Taoism?
that well, it is this from what I gather, it's not dualistic.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Dualistic. Yeah, I wouldn't know how a dualism would work with at least with what we've
Without
read
separate, yeah.
with a dualism, how a dualism would work.
Hmm.
I think that it's all apparent, it's all illusory.
Hmm.
You know, um, and to go back to what I said, a couple sessions ago, I think that it's interesting. Even again, playing with a possible world that is not our own. I mean, how does the world change in your own experience, or maybe broader, by adopting that view? You know,
Yeah.
even if you don't know it's true, you know,
Hmm.
um,
Well,
that's
I think it gives you more compassion,
yeah,
if everything is you, at
yeah,
its core, or if you are
yeah,
part of everything,
yeah.
um, because I don't know, separateness
You're not going to hurt yourself.
creates, yeah, well, yeah, and separateness creates like, I mean, division, otheredness,
Hmm.
like
Yeah,
by
yeah,
definition.
yeah,
And
exactly.
there's a lot of like hate can only be given to another, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, you don't hate
Yeah.
something that is the same as you.
Yeah. Yeah. Unless there's like a disorder, as it were, right?
Well,
That would be that would be.
yeah, but then you're still
I'm
separating
saying
that part
there's
of you, right? Like you're
actually you
creating a
are. You
separateness.
no, you're right.
Yeah,
You're right. You're right.
yeah,
Because there's something in you that doesn't like another aspect of you, as it
yeah.
were, right?
Hmm.
So you're creating, a type of dualism.
Hmm.
No, I think you're right. The passion is a massive one. Uh, love, care, so care for everything.
Hmm.
Um, and um, yeah, and actually like a really great metaphysical foundation for true community and the importance of community, and to
Cooperation.
commune,
Hmm.
yeah, and to work with,
Hmm.
you know. Um, and I would bet if you were to play it out as sort of a possible world exercise, you would you would get back through your feedback loop some positive results. Do you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
You know, you know.
Like if in a world where um, people act as they do, if you
Yeah,
act with this view, then you'll
sure.
receive something back. Right, right.
I would entirely, yeah, totally,
Hmm.
totally. You know, yeah. So, you could even sort of play, a pragmatic approach. Let me see how it works.
Hmm.
Let me see let me see what the effects are of this view,
Yeah.
um, and as almost another avenue, as it were, to exploring the veracity of the view,
Hmm.
um, which I think is interesting. And I'm sorry, I can't help but think that it would only be positive. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Oh, for sure. No, I feel like if
if you
everybody had
yeah,
this mindset, then
yeah,
would you have war? Would you have
yeah,
conflict? Like, I don't
right.
know.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Yeah. I mean, you have to get
Because
over your senses, but still.
at some point, that's all of the world's ills, and then all of our personal ills. I mean, other than ones we can't control, like disease, let's say,
Hmm.
um, are related to the fact that I want something,
Hmm.
that I want something, and I don't see myself as connected to you, right?
Hmm.
Putin doesn't see himself as sharing Brahman with Zelensky,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
And if you were the same, why, you're not gonna harm yourself. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it would dissolve. It would dissolve more conflict at the macro and micro level. You know,
Hmm.
um, and I would say too within the self, within an individual, that's has conflicts and has a frustrated psyche. At
Yeah.
some level, um, you take it back to some of the other principles about like, oh, maybe I'm too hung up on ego. Okay, and 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 I mean that in the sort of the Vedic sense, right? I am this separate self, and I need these things, and so on and so forth. And then you add some things like, self-restraint and um, interconnectedness, and you can start to let some of those internal tensions dissolve.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, it's very interesting. It's very interesting. It, it's one of the reasons why your metaphysics of self and the world is so essential, because, and that means for like anyone. It means for everyone in your house. It
Hmm.
means for me. It means for my neighbors and everyone around the world. Is that ultimately it's ultimately to determine certain outcomes. You know, I mean, I think we talked about this before, but the problem, the big problem for Christianity is original sin and a fallen self. If you believe that, that's
Hmm.
going to have a different outcome than for Buddhism. It's none of that. For Buddhism, you're pure. You're absolutely pure. There's no fallenness. There's none of that. The
Right.
problem's not that. It's not you. I'm sorry. It's not a fallen nature inherited from Adam.
Hmm.
It's it is it, for Buddhism. It's desire. It's
Yeah.
the problem is that you have desires. You have way too many desires, and with all these desires, you're never going to fulfill them. And when you don't fulfill them, then you're frustrated.
Right.
So get rid of desires.
Hmm.
But that's different than the narrative of the fall, right?
Hmm. Yeah, it's
I
interesting.
am blocking your car.
um,
Give me 1 second.
yeah, you're
Hold
good.
that thought. Sorry, I forgot that. Love you. Go on.
Hmm. Um, yeah, I was thinking when you were saying that, um, with the Putin example and the Christianity versus Buddhism.
Buddhism.
It just and the whole, I mean, metaphysics, how metaphysics, your concept of metaphysics affects how you view the world. It
Yeah,
just made me think, um, of the different ways that can manifest in people. Like, I
yeah.
mean, it can be as simple as just doing things for your own sake, like for your own
Mm-hmm.
benefit.
Mm-hmm.
It can be more complicated. It can be like capitalism, right?
Yeah.
Like if your view of the
Yeah.
world is make money, you know,
Mm-hmm.
buy things and sell things, so that you can make more money or produce things, or if your view of the world is to whatever you're doing is for the betterment of humanity. It's like
Mm-hmm.
everybody has some sort of reason
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
why they act the way
And
they do, even if they
and I
don't
would
know that
yeah,
reason,
that's what I was going to say. I
right?
actually think that for most people, they are unaware that they have that particular worldview,
Yeah,
or why they have it. It's just
sure.
assumed.
Hmm.
It's just assumed. It's like, especially within a capitalist society, it's just assumed that's what you do. That's what you
Yeah,
do.
because I
Get it?
mean, monkey see, monkey do.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
uh, we are we are modeled after the context that we grew up in, the
Yeah.
environment, and so we create the same image that other people
Hmm.
have of the world.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so yeah, it was just really interesting. And then I was also thinking how this idea of the self, Atman, and
Hmm.
Brahman, it's I almost want to say it's like fundamental reality. like
Hmm. Yeah,
like if it truly is everything and it
sure.
permeates everything, then it's like almost atomic. Like it
Yeah,
is the
yeah.
unit of existence. And
Absolutely.
and
That
whenever
is,
we
oh,
create separateness, right? Like we start looking at atoms, we start
hmm,
looking at molecules, we start looking at cells and organisms, and we create these divisions, arbitrary or not, right? Like
hmm,
patterns or not, like this is a separate thing
yeah,
from me,
yeah,
that like we're kind of building up this hierarchy of separateness until we
yeah,
get to like this abstract layer where it's like you have conflict, you have war between
yeah,
nations, and it's like
yeah.
what is that? What is war between nations? It's like this
Right.
conglomerate of all of these
Yeah,
little these physical things, these people, these ideas,
yeah,
these concepts until it's like boom, that
yeah,
like that's where the war starts. The war doesn't
yeah.
start down here
No,
at
not at
at
all, not at
reality, at
all.
physics.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's
Which
just
which which is
mhm.
interesting because that basically means then that if Brahman is this fundamental reality, and by the way, we should say Brahman is. fundamentally good. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, and or like that, I mean, truly good throughout. That, yeah, everything that's going on the surface of it is either an aberration of it, right?
Hmm.
Which would be the things you just mentioned, all the ills of the
Yeah.
world, or it's a manifestation of it,
Hmm.
or like a true like manifestation of what it ought to be. Like the life of a yogi, let's say.
Sure.
Or the practitioner of your bhakti yogi or something like that. So that would be a manifestation, a pure manifestation, an extension of it. Everything else on it would be an aberration.
Hmm.
It goes against it, you know. And I would say, even though, and it's tricky because obviously a lot of good comes from capitalism, but I would say that a lot of the unthinking, uh, participants within a capitalist economy. I mean, it's greed, right?
Hmm.
Fame, fortune, winning. You know, those seem to those seem to be the aberration that creates ego, itself. Oh no, oh gosh, it's
What?
that day.
It's
I
that.
forgot because we skipped a week.
Oh, oh, right. It's
The cleaners are here.
yeah,
Let me just go inside. Well, not cleaners,
the
gardeners.
gardeners. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, no, it's. I mean, and to go back to why your metaphysics matter, um, so it's going to be true with even like scientific materials. You know,
Hmm.
everything is matter in motion. There are no souls. There are no spirits. All right. Well, how's that going to play out, right?
Hmm.
Um, that's going to ultimately play out in terms of, and that's atomistic as well, right?
Right.
Meaning, in other words, you're breaking things down into these discrete parts. Um, that will have an effect as well,
Hmm.
on your view of things. Life is, well, for true materialism, life would be essentially without meaning for us other than reproduction and to live as long as we can, right?
Right.
At some level.
Hmm.
So they all have sort of put it this way, metaphysics has consequences.
Absolutely.
You
I
know,
think even um, they might even have more consequences when you're not aware of them. And
yeah,
that might be weird to
yeah,
say, but like somebody
yeah,
who lives in America, for example, in a capitalist society, who doesn't think about their metaphysic or
yeah,
why they're doing what they're doing,
yeah,
that just means that they are playing the greater system, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
without knowing it, every transaction somebody makes, everything somebody buys from a store
Uh-huh.
is bolstering the corporations,
Yeah.
the individuals who run those corporations. Like
Hmm.
be just existing in that society without even thinking about it
Yeah.
is is making it bigger,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which is weird to think
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, um I mean, we're making a larger point too about just not even about like Hindu metaphysics, but also we're to be reflective, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
To think about to think about why we're doing what we're doing, why we believe what we believe,
Mhm.
and what are the reasons for it? What you know why do we take this position and to toil with it, to struggle with it? Like that's a better life than to be, as Plato would say, to use his cave allegory, to be the slave staring at the shadows on the wall,
Mhm.
thinking that's real, you know.
Right.
And we have those projections are all over the place,
Mhm.
right? I mean, another interesting one too is like, every now and I think about it, when I watch a Pixar movie, it's like, what values are coming through here? Like, what are the values? And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the values as it relates to children are self-affirmation, and you can do it. Be unique,
Mm-hmm.
and don't be held back, right? And sometimes don't be held back by tradition or the family or parents, you know. And it's sort of like, is that the only option we have? Right? No. Or another one too, right? They're never tragic.
Mm.
They're never tragic. You show me a Pixar movie that where all the main characters died, you know,
Right.
and by the way, that's life sometimes. So that's shadows on the wall. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
and kids lap it up, and then um, ultimately start to inculcate those values without even thinking. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
like what is this doing to me? It's a bit of a reason why I'm a slight movie snob, because it's like, give me something that's challenging, give me something that's going to stretch me either intellectually or, God forbid, morally.
Mm-hmm.
That really makes me think about something that challenges assumptions that I have. But that, I would say, the like pop culture is a massive has a massive influence on. And by the way, I'm a consumer of it too,
Mm-hmm.
but it has a massive influence on shaping the views of the individual. Uh, and a lot of this happens early on, and then you're screwed. You know, unless you've got someone, you know,
Need to
like
reflect. Yeah.
yeah, the Upanishadic teacher who says, "Sit down and let's work this out."
Yeah.
This might be a good place to stop, Christian.
Yeah.
Great discussion, and
Mm-hmm.
then we can just finish the rest of this Upanishad and tag on
Yeah.
another day.
Sounds good.
Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.